great pleasure that I've made my way out to the Phegan property with Danny Phegan, who I've crossed paths with many a time over the years, but this time around solely focused around you, Danny. So thanks so much for inviting us out to your family property to start with.
No worries, good to see you.
We'll start with your heritage to the Albury-Wodonga region. Were you born here?
No, look, the Phegans came out in the wagons from the Barossa to the Walla Walla area in 2006. No, I was born in Willinga,
Yeah.
just near Thaguna. Caroline comes from a farming family. She's a Clancy, and we've always been on a little bit of land. Mum and Dad had 200 or 300 acres there in Thaguna near the golf course. So we've always been brought up with cattle and sheep and horses, and Caroline in a big way. And when we got together, we knew we wanted a farm, so we looked for a long time. We're bridesmaids a few times, and we've bought this property in stages over the last 12 or 13 years.
Let's go through your resume. What's on it?
Well, I don't know. What's at the end of it? Am I getting a job? I don't know, mate. Went to school, mucked around too much, had a good time, didn't get the marks to do law, so I went back and did year 12 again. Into law for 4 years, 3.5 years. Had enough of that. I thought I was old enough to get into real estate and the family business, and Dad thought I wasn't, so I jumped on a plane and went to America to live. I was breaking in horses and taking trail rides through the Rocky Mountains over there. Had a phone call with Dad 6 months later. He said I was old enough to go into the family business, so I jumped on a plane, came home, and he denied saying that, said get back and finish your law, so I jumped on a plane, went to Europe with Dom Alessi, another local from Albury. So I got a bit of a look around the place back then, had a few life experiences, and came home, and Dad still didn't think I was old enough to get into real estate, so I got a job with his brother in competition with him for 2.5 years, and then we ended up opening W.A. Phegan and Son down at South Albury, mainly focused on sort of property and hotels.
In the background, you've developed a few hobbies that I guess have probably turned into a profession for you.
Yeah, look, I was always pretty driven. I did my first gig when I was 16, and I've played a couple of nights a week since then until recently. I've sort of taken it more seriously in the last couple of years, which means bigger gigs but fewer of them. So I've turned in from a hobby into chasing something a bit bigger now with music, but music's been very good to us over the years. A lot of fun. It was a good outlet when I was so busy too. I was riding racehorses, track work. I was trying to hire jukeboxes and had some arcade games in pubs, and I had a company there for a while taking brides to their weddings in horse and carriage called Colonial Carriages, and then if I could talk myself up enough, I'd sing at their wedding that night. So I had a few things going on, as well as studying my valuation ticket in real estate.
Publican?
Publican for a brief period. That was by default, not by design. I bought the Gerodgery Hotel when I was 20. I was on the way to sing at my cousin's 21st in Wagga, and Dad and I were just having a bit of a yarn, and he was saying how good the Tar Cutter pub had been to him, which he'd owned for quite a while. I was like a cat with a paw on 4 mice and looking for a fifth back then. I just wanted a piece of everything. He thought I was too young to go into the pub game, but we called into Gerodgery to get a 6-pack just to have a couple on the way to Wagga. He said, as a matter of fact, that little pub there's for sale. Wouldn't be a bad pub. I'd had a little bit of money saved, but not enough to buy it. So Dad went from completely against the idea. By the time I nagged him for another hour on the way to Wagga to play at my cousin's 21st, we'd settled that I had to put everything I had up, and he'd guarantee a mortgage for 2 years, but he wanted his money back within 2 years. So yeah, that was a Gerodgery Hotel. I was 20 years old, so I've had it for 22 years now, and 6 years ago was the first time I had to run it. It was always tenanted. There was a lot of pressure to run it too, because we've built our careers selling pubs and telling other people how they should run their pubs. Now I had to go on show and do it myself. But it's a good little pub, and it's a great district, and we're a part of the community out here now. And it was a great learning curve for me, hands-on experience, and also to get to know the locals.
More recently, you're a professional musician. You're a charting country music artist.
Yeah.
How does that come about?
Don't know.
You've done a lot of things, Danny. You're a surprise package, but what was the inspiration? Take us through. You've obviously performed in pubs like the Kinross, for example, for many years. I know you've got a cult following, and particularly in the local and regional pockets.
I wouldn't say it's a cult following.
No, it is.
We've got a good following, but it's only local.
Yeah.
It's only local, and I'm trying to branch out now. I can be flippant or serious with this answer, but I'll be serious for a moment. I looked around in my late teens and early 20s, and I've always been pretty realistic about my own ability and where I was at. And went to Tamworth a couple of times, and when I looked around, there were people that were a lot better singers than me, a lot better looking, and they're all broke. So I thought, well, I don't want that trophy. So I was happy just to work, and I think it's a bit of a trade-off. If you're trying to get famous, like we are now, really, and we're not trying to get famous, but we're trying to get some success on bigger stages. And a lot of the times you've got to trade being paid for that high-profile exposure. And I think if you do that at a young age, well, you forego all that opportunity to earn an income. I was just happy to get paid, pay in pubs and get paid. And it was a fairly modest fee, Mr. Taxman. It was consistent, you know, and it helped, and I was just happy to do that. And I remember our great mate Nick Conway said to me one night, I had a regular spot at the commercial club in a few places for years. I left those spots to go and do the cancer ride. I rode a horse from Darwin to the bottom of Cockle Creek in Tasmania, and we donated $530,000 or a bit over to the Cancer Council. And we donated that year. None of us got paid, of course, but I came back to having to start again in music. I had no regular haunts or anywhere to play. And Nick Conway was the first bloke I went to see at Kinross. Our company had just sold him the pub. And I said, mate, I'm a muso. Would you give me a start? And this is getting back to my point of exposure versus getting paid. And he said, Nick's a good businessman. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, you pay the first 3 gigs for free and I'll get you some spots on a radio station. And I said, well, you keep your radio station. I'll do the first gig for free. If I go any good, I expect to be paid for the next 2, and I want the money after I'm finished playing. I don't want the radio spots, I want the cash. Yeah. So Nick and I operated under that basis. I did the first gig for nothing, and it went very well, and I think I've played there every 6 weeks since then, and that was 15 years ago. And he's been a great supporter.
So, talking about your country music career that's somewhat coming about now with top 10 songs on download and stream and what have you, did Mr. Ed, did you always, did part of you aspire to be a country music singer?
Yeah, it did. It just, you know, as I was saying before, it just looked like it was too hard to crack it back then, and it's hard now too. And the honest answer is, and it sounds conceited, and I hope it doesn't come across that way, but it's always been an itch that I wanted to scratch. But I can afford to be a struggling muso now, whereas I couldn't before, you know, and that's the honest answer. So I thought, you know, I'm 42 now, and I don't want to leave that itch unscratched. And I've really enjoyed the process of writing songs, and I feel like I've got a fair bit of life experience, and I want to get that down on paper. And that's the truth, mate. I thought,
or to tell now.
I thought, it costs money to do albums, it costs money to do film clips, and I thought, well, if it doesn't work, at least I've ticked the box. But I didn't want to invest all my energies in doing that as a late teenager or early 20-year-old and forego anything that I might have been trying to build up.
So you said you're enjoying the process of writing the songs.
Yep.
Where's the inspiration for that come from, the lyrics and the stories?
Drinking too much. Drinking way too much. Some of them are. The 3 parts drunk 4 a.m. after hours domestic terminal blues. Well, that's a story. True story too. I was stuck at the Sydney airport. Couldn't find a beer anywhere, 4 in the morning. Well, I'll write a song about it. And there's another one on the album too, Before Grog Got a Hold of Me. And like, I come from a long line of big drinkers on both sides. We're hard workers, but we play hard too. And I love people's stories, and all the travelling I do around Australia, I love barfly stories. You know, there's always a barfly in the corner with the bright purple nose, and usually got a plaque on the wall that this is Snowy's Corner or something like that. I just gravitate to those people, and I love their stories. And I've found in all the pubs I've visited all around Australia, their stories are very similar. They had it all and they blew it because Grog got a hold of them. And I've often said to Caroline, do you think I've got a drinking problem? She says, I think you've got a drinking problem you're in control of.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's led to you having a charted country music
well,
album, really,
that's
singles,
it.
Hasn't it?
So I wouldn't say it's an autobiography, that song, but it's, you know, it's up there.
Are you surprised at how quick the country music success has sort of come your way? I know you've been working away at it since you're 16, but really the series attempt at an album and everything, it's happened relatively quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I wasn't at the start because I've had a lifetime of relationships too, and quite often music and industry relationships cross-pollinate with other things you're doing in life. Like, you know, I've got to know a lot of musos through different walks of life down here, and I thought I would probably be accepted to some extent, but I couldn't have envisaged the success that this album's had so far. I mean, the album went to #1 on the ARIA charts. I thought that'd be fairyland sort of stuff, fairy tale stuff. And just yesterday I got a message from the distributor that the latest single, I'd Be Over You, has just gone top 10 on Australian country radio. So that's brilliant, you know, and that just helps us get a little bit more of the festival gigs, more so than the 2 and 3 in the morning bar gigs, which I'm just getting too old for now.
Does it make you money having a song these days? You know, you used to press album.
No, look, I'll be honest with you. What I'm doing now doesn't make money. Really doesn't.
So you can be a #1 album at the moment.
It equates to 2/5 of 5/8, which is bugger all in the old language. It really doesn't. You've really got to crack it to make money, you know. Like there'd only be the tiny peak of the pyramid, I reckon, in Australian country music are going really, really well. My album, as we just said, went #1 on the ARIA charts. This next single's just gone top 10. It's stayed in the top 10 on the iTunes charts for a week or 8 days, which is, you're right there with Keith Urban and all these people. That's tremendous traction. And I got my first royalty check last week for $457. And that's a true story. So who'd be trying to hang their hat on a professional music career?
Obviously, you know, the exposure of that following to go and get those big gigs, and hopefully that's. But you're still working. It's not a residual income, is it?
No, that's right. But it has a flow. Exactly, it has a flow-on effect though, because that sort of success gets you better and more high-profile gigs, of which you've got merch stands and you can sell your CDs yourself, which you keep 100% of, and you know, your singlets and shirts and all that sort of stuff, and that side of it's not too bad.
You mentioned and I think for me this is a fairly significant one. There's many angles to this, but you ride for charity. For anyone who hasn't heard the story, in a nutshell, take us through what it entailed. Where were you in your life? What year?
I was 26. I'd been planning it for a few years though. I was great mates with my grandfather, who was a local legend. His name was Herbie Frere. He was a stock buyer for 52 years. He was a light horseman, a drover. Best mates of Pat Kernaghan, who was also a drover, who of course was Lee Kernaghan's grandfather, and that's how the family connection began. And Pa and I were very close because the Phegans came to town with nothing. Pa Phegan didn't get into real estate until he's in his mid to late 50s. He's 56, I think. He was selling washing machines in Mate Street at a pawn shop. He was just getting whatever he could get and selling it second hand. And a bloke came in who he knew had a real estate licence, and he asked if he could sell some real estate under this bloke's banner. So Pa didn't start earning a quid really or getting himself together until he's much later in life. So the Phegans started with nothing, and Dad was very busy, and Dad was a go-getter, and Pa and I were together a lot. I think Pa had me maybe 5 days a week in the early days. So we had a terrific friendship, and he died of cancer when I was 17, nearly 17, only a couple of weeks short. It's just one of those things that sticks with you, and my contempt and hate of cancer is still bubbles pretty close to the surface now, and I take it personally. I don't like cancer, you know, no one does, but I nearly view it as a person who I detest, and so I started trying to think of ways that we could fight it and battle against it, and had this idea to do a big horse ride. Initially I was going to try and push cattle from Darwin all the way down, but it became a mammoth sort of exercise. It was a mammoth ride anyway, and we got caught in what they were calling the worst drought in 100 years too, the 02-03 drought. So we decided we'd just ride from Darwin through the territory in Queensland, and we'd be riding one horse and leading another, and halfway through the day we'd throw the saddle on the other one, so we're keeping them reasonably fresh. We had a support truck and a support crew. We were just doing whatever we could to fundraise, selling raffle tickets, auctioneering items. I'd sing every time we'd pull up at a hall or anywhere. I'd put on a show and sing, and whatever we made that night would go into the kitty. Then once we got to New South Wales, that was when we started the cattle drive. So we pushed cattle from Boggabilla down to Tamworth in time for the Country Music Festival. And Lee and a bunch of great Australian country acts had donated a track to a CD which Garth Porter put out for us called Trail of Dreams, which was the namesake of that CD was a single that Sarah Storer, Martin Oakes and Garth wrote, which was about us. And that sold, I think, 8,000 copies, that CD. So through New South Wales, we're pushing cattle. When we got to Tamworth, the drought just was too much to fight. And, you know, the media, it's hard to get in the media and the papers and the big shows with a good news story. It's very easy to get on with a bad news story. Some poor bugger tried to cross the Nullarbor at the same time with a bunch of camels and got as far as Kalgoorlie and had to shoot the camels. Well, he was on the front page of everything. So we were mindful of that we wanted to keep this thing shiny and successful. So unfortunately, we had to sell all the cattle at Tamworth and reinvent the ride. So old school droving became 21st century droving, which was farmers would donate a beast straight to the sale yards. And whatever town we're riding through, we'd have a special Campfires Against Cancer sale. And all those cattle, the proceeds of those would go into the tally, which went to the Cancer Council. But we weren't physically pushing cattle on the road south of Tamworth, which was a real shame because I'd envisaged crossing the Hume Wall, with 1,000 head. But we had to be practical and we had to make sure it worked. I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but it was a big year.
It's a great story and one that led to a book, which has gone on to continue, I guess, a charitable outcome.
Yeah, look, we were on the road for a bit over 11 months. Straight after that, we were offered a publish with a ghost writer, pay TV, documentary, all these sort of things, but it all took time, and we donated a year already. I donated a year. My mate sold his house so he could be on the ride. Colin Mitchell, my great mate who died of cancer last year, ironically. Another mate left his auto lec apprenticeship so he'd come and drive the truck. Everyone donated a year, and there's only so much in one hit you can give. These documentaries and publishings and things, they were going to take time. The documentary itself, we had 100 and something hours of footage, of which the channel, I can't remember what channel it was now, but they only wanted about 10 hours, which they were going to bring back to 2. So I sat in Mum and Dad's cabin at Midder there on the Snowy Creek for 2 weeks, looking at footage and then rewinding and then dubbing it, which sounds thrilling, but it really is quite tiresome after a while. And when I sent it off, I dubbed it in the wrong format and they couldn't use it and asked me to do it again. So that's akin to what happened with the book publish. It just got all too hard. I started writing manuscript, but I had to get back to work, all those sort of things, and it fell by the wayside. And after 4 or 5 years, it was an old story, and I felt like its time had come and gone. But I kept in touch with the Cancer Council, and I made sure that I could track where the money went, and that was important to me, so I could report back to everybody who donated. And still, people sometimes I think I'm a full-time fundraiser. I'm not. I've only done half a dozen things, but they're usually reasonably large things when I do them because I focus my energies on them, but I always like to be able to track where the money goes so I can report back. So for 10 years after the ride, I'd ring the Cancer Council every year, ask where the money was. It went into a research fellowship, ask what successes and failures it was generating, and then at my own cost I'd put an ad in the Northern Daily Leader, the Queensland Country Life, the Weekly Times, the Land and the Hobart Mercury, just with our logo, and say to everybody who donated to the Campfires Against Cancer ride, this is where the money's up to and this is what we're trying to do. So because I kept that close contact with the Cancer Council, and particularly Dr. Andrew Penman and Professor Phil Hogg, they were able to tell me about 4 or 5 years ago that because of the drugs which our money had kick-started, there was a breakthrough, and they developed a drug called, the first one was GSAO, which they sent for clinical trials over to the UK, which I think they regretted because the wheels turn much slowly and becomes much more expensive. The second drug, which we're quite excited about, and I hope I get the acronym right, is PENAO, which is currently in clinical trials at the Peter Mac in Melbourne as we speak, and they're hopeful it's going to manage brain tumours, which I think is going to be the next big thing with cancer. I think every second bloke you know or lady you know is got a headache, and I'm pretty sceptical about these mobile phones and everything, time will tell. But I've only got to look around my own circle of friends. There's probably 6, 7, 8 that I can rattle off now just thinking about them that have had brain tumours. So we're particularly excited about this drug, and it's going well. And on the strength of that, I thought I should finish this manuscript that I started. See how long it takes to answer a question?
Doing well.
And because I got married too, Caroline and I have been together since high school, and we've got married and we had kids, and I thought they might like to read about what we did someday. So, and I had 2 uncles and an auntie that had cancer at the time, and I wanted to get something out that they could be proud of, because obviously it featured my grandfather and their father fairly heavily, who was the reason that we did the ride, Herb Frere. So I finished this manuscript to the best that I could do, bearing in mind that I failed English twice, and I handed it out to the family, and everyone was thrilled and I was happy. And then with fresh eyes a few months later, I looked at it and had a heap of grammatical and spelling errors, and it really rolled me. So I reined in all those copies back again, and I took it to an editor, just Googled editor, and I found one in Albury, Orme Harris. I said, Orme, fix that and give it back to me and give me the bill. So she went through it and she fell in love with the story. She hadn't heard of the story. She wasn't here when we did it. And she said, do you mind if I show this to a publisher? And I said, yeah, look, go your hardest, but I don't want anything out of it. I said, Eric Turner's been campaigning for me to do something for the Albury-Wodonga Cancer Foundation and Trust for years. If a publisher picks it up, we'll donate it to the hospital. So to make a long story shorter than what it's been so far, a publisher picked it up. We had a book launch night, which you were good enough to host for me, and we raised $54,000 that night, and we gave it to the split between the Albury-Wodonga Cancer Foundation and the Regional Cancer Centre in Albury.
It was a great night too.
Big night.
Still remember it well. Feedback from the research. Am I correct in saying that somebody has recently contacted you?
Yeah, wow.
You can't get any more personal on this to put
No,
back the
you
work
can't.
for you, what is now 15 years ago,
No.
with that ride. Explain the story of what happened.
Well, the phone goes off a fair bit. It's rung a couple of times since we've been sitting here, but when I closed the real estate office, I turned the sound off and haven't turned the sound back on again. The phone was vibrating. I compete with Trav's father a fair bit, Pete, and we're competing at this time of year probably every second weekend with two-handed cutting, team penning, camp drafting. Great family environment, which I enjoy taking the kids to. The phone went off in my pocket after I had a speed penning run, and I had a pretty good run. I think I penned this beast in 11 seconds, and I was feeling pretty good about it. Maybe that's why I answered the phone. And I felt it go off, and as I was leaving the arena, I picked it up, pulled it out of my back pocket, and I said, hello. And the lady said, is this Danny Phegan? And I said, well, if it's not, he's having a lot of fun with his missus. And I didn't get a laugh. I thought, oh, tough crowd. And the lady said, I've been looking for your number for 6 months. She said her name is Kerry, such and such. And she said, I just want to let you know that you saved my life. Oh, God. Isn't that a cool thing? So all those years ago, this lady said, I just wanted you and your friends to know that you saved my life. She was on this troll drug that was down at the Peter Mac. So that goes to show just, what you do today, how big a difference it can make tomorrow. And that's only one person. There might have been 20 people like that. I know we saved a life over in the UK because they've sent me her photo, but they can't tell me her name, which is fair enough. So I often wonder what trials have those families been through, not only the person, but the broader family, for them to be the recipient of an unknown drug and say, well, you're buggered. Try this and we'll see how we go. And to have success with that, it's just the best feeling ever. It's amazing.
And as you said, you've heard from one.
Yeah, we've only heard from one lady who was good
stop?
enough to track us down, and it was lovely, and we keep in regular contact now.
You reap what you sow, certainly given by the sounds of things, everything a crack in life. How do you think other people would describe you? How do you think you're perceived?
I think not exceptionally. I like being more than I appear to be. I'm always curious about things, and I want to try things and do things, and I don't think I'm trying to think of the right word, but I don't think, certainly not special. That's what I'm trying to say in a very basic way. But I gauge people's reactions to me when I'm out. Like just did a week-long rally out in the bush, and no one knows me from bar of soap out there. And I can tell I'm not particularly striking or interesting because I don't get much time at all from strangers. But once they start peeling away the layers of the onion, I can see them get more interested in me and start to gravitate closer and closer. And by the end of the week, they're looking up YouTube and a few things and, and I'm lying if I didn't say that I don't enjoy that because, I was never anything special at school and you always want to achieve something more and be more than you appear to be. And I like that. I like trying things and I like trying to achieve and I like trying to add to my story.
What do you do with your spare time? What are your hobbies? It sounds like you...
Have interviews with mates?
Yeah, the beers have not long arrived. It sounds like almost, would you say you're living the life that you're happy to live? Like, you're comfortable with your balance?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've got the balance right now. I think I've got the balance. I don't think I had the balance right for a long time. I mean, we've got a nice farm and we're going okay, but I've had to sacrifice a fair bit over 20 years to do that too. When I was younger and mates were going out, I wasn't. I was always working. Being in business comes with conflicts and stress, and I don't enjoy the conflicts anymore. I didn't enjoy them then, but I certainly don't enjoy that sort of level of stress now. But we went through a particularly stressful period 4 or 5 years ago where we could have lost the farm. We had a bloke go bankrupt on us and flee to New Guinea, and he owed a lot of money to a lot of people. And ours was a property purchase which he failed on and left. But on the strength of thinking that we'd sold that property, we went and bought the neighbour's place and completely overextended. And that took a few years to recover. And Caroline used to say, she'd think I was dead because I'd be asleep with my eyes open looking at the ceiling, and I'd just fall asleep doing sums, wondering how I can plug these holes and what we can do. And every now and then I can still see my sums on the shower screen. Just every now and then when it fogs up the right way, I can still see that, that's going to come in from sheep and this much will come in from cattle, and that will get me through to October, and 26,000 a month interest gets us through to there, and it was a stressful period, but it's hard to get ahead without that stress too. I mean, you've got to take those sort of things on. But Caroline said to me in that period, which was a lovely thing for a wife to say to her husband, she said, "I don't know why you're doing it." She said, "I'm completely satisfied. I've got everything in life I could have hoped for. I don't know why you're doing it." And I thought, well, if you're happy and the kids are happy, why am I doing it? So we went through a consolidation phase about 4 years ago. We had a lot of investment properties, a couple of other pubs, and on paper it was all meant to be making money, but it wasn't. You turn over telephone numbers, but you still were left with nothing at the end of the year. So we sold everything, and we're not leaping forward or accumulating like we were for 20 years, but we're happy. And, I'm spending heaps of time with my kids, and my fourth child was probably born in the brunt of all that stressful period and everything. And she, I was probably coming home in a bad mood, and my stock agent, my great mate Timmy Robinson, had a quote once, and he's so right, and he's still in the soup now with business, full-time in business. He said, you give the best of yourself to perfect strangers every day, and you take home what's left to the ones who matter the most. And you do, and you've got to in business. You've got to give those people time, or you just don't get the deals and you don't get things happening. But it's nice to be in a place now where we've paid the farm off down to where we can hold our own with what we owe and stay here. I can work here. I don't have to go into town now. And I get to see my kids every day. We ride nearly every night. So I've got the balance right now. But it takes hard work to be able to get to a point to get the balance right, I guess, is what I'll say in short.
What would you consider to be your biggest achievement in life so far?
Oh, I don't know, mate. My story's not written yet. I'm still trying. I think we've got another push left in us. We've got another ride left in us. Look, the obvious answer is Caroline and the kids. That's probably not the answer you're looking for, but I don't know, mate. I don't know.
The kids, I think, is a great reason. You've
well,
got 6 of them.
Yeah, my word. Well, the family's everything to me. My old man said to me when I first got married, he said, mate, have as many kids as you can, because at the end of the day, they're all that matters to you and you're all that matters to them. And it's true. You've got a big family. You know it to be true. It sounds like a cliche, but the Caroline and the kids are certainly my greatest achievement. If you're looking for a commercial achievement or something other than that, I don't know. I'm still trying.
What's the toughest decision you've ever had to make?
Could give you a very deep one, but I don't want to give it to you because it'll upset too many people. But I'll tell you the toughest decision I've ever had to make, and I'll give it to you really quickly, and you might not use it. Me great mate, who I clinked stirrup heels with for 5,500 Ks once, died of cancer nearly a year ago to the day. And I sat with him in the last couple of weeks, and his wife. And he got to the stage where he's in that much pain. They told us the next pain relief he had would be his last. And it was a very, very, very hard thing to do, because he wasn't really with us, and he was struggling. And we couldn't get any answers out of him. And I leant over and I said, and I won't mention his name just out of respect for his wife because it'll upset her, but I said, mate, I need an answer, yes or no. Are you in pain? And he said, yes. And that was all we got out of him. So I said to his wife, we've got to give it to him, and that was it. Don't use that, mate.
No.
I'll think of something else in a minute.
No, you're right. You're right.
But you know what, Danny, we got it now.
Yeah, well, that was tough. That was a tough decision, and yeah, we live with it fine. We're not haunted by it because it needed to happen. But that was tough. A lot of those memories, are going to go in that moment. You don't have too many mates in life who can finish your stories, do you?
What's something you can tell me now that not many people know about you? Might be a fun fact. Might be the world.
You should have sent those questions out a fortnight ago. Notting Hill's my favourite movie. There you go.
I love it. If you could be anywhere else in the world tomorrow, Danny, where would you be? Who would you be with? Finances are no problem. What would you do?
I'll never leave here. They'll bury me here because I'm settled, but I love the mountains. I love the mountains, and Caroline loves the flat. So we've settled here right in the middle, but I can see myself as I get older gravitating more to the hills, fresh water and hills. I love it, especially with your horses up there. And that's why, you know, I'm thrilled that the kids are learning to ride and can handle themselves with horses. We're not chasing trophies and buckles and ribbons. You know, that stuff's nice, but if they know the thrill like I know to saddle up a good horse and go for a ride through the mountains, it's magic.
What's next for you? We sit down here in 5 years' time. I mean, you've already mentioned a moment ago you've got another ride in you.
Yeah, I keep circling back to it, you know, and every time I just feel a little bit duty bound to do it, because I've got sponsors that will sponsor me again, and they're hard to get. And when they're knocking on the door asking you, you sort of feel a little bit obliged to do something, because people aren't just going to hand over the money to the cancer council or anything like that without a vehicle where they can get a little bit of exposure. And I keep circling back to it, and Caroline and I have spoken about it, and every time I get fired right up about it, I go and grab a couple of the old diaries from 15 years ago and just see how big a job it was. But I think we've got one more push left in us. You know, that was the standout fundraiser. We've done 2 or 3 since then and got away from the cancer theme on one occasion for a mate of mine who's got MND. But I just think we can do it. We've got the means to do it. I think if we had another crack, you know, I would feel much better about the life I've had. You know, if we can just have one more push and give a little bit more. I'm very grateful, you know, that I can live in a property and my kids are close to me and the horses are here and all the rest of it. And doing those things, it just brings out the best in you, and it brings out the best in people around you, and it just shows the gratitude for the life you've got, I think, too. So stay tuned. I've already marked out the waterways from Perth to Sydney. I've done the trip once in the car and revived some relationships out there. I think it'll happen. It might be a couple of years.
Danny Phegan, I look forward to sitting here in 5 years and finding out, maybe 10 years, maybe 15, and finding out more about what you've managed to achieve. But one thing that I already knew, but it certainly reminded me today, is you're just a knock-around, average Australian bloke. You said, in your own words, you're nothing special.
Very average.
No, you said you're nothing special, but a lot of people would tend to argue that. And people of all ages could learn something from what you've done with your life, whether it was while you're at school or what you've done more recently with family and I guess your professional life now. But I guess the main thing is thank you so much for allowing us to spend a bit of time to open up a bit of your life and hopefully leave some more for people to do a bit more research, do some Googling, find out about your country music, and find a copy of your book that still supports charity as well. And
Good.
Danny Phegan, thanks so much.
I feel like I was bloody sooking halfway through that. Is that it?